My name is Avery Collins. I am 22 years old, and on the day I walked across my college graduation stage as the student representative, delivering the commencement address to 10,000 people after 4 years of working 3 jobs to pay my own tuition, my parents did not come. Because my brother was home watching other men play football on television, and they had decided that was more important than witnessing my summa cum laude diploma being placed in my hands. They threw a 50-person watch party at our house in Westlake Hills, hired caterers, installed an 80-inch outdoor television near the pool, and ordered a 3-foot cake airbrushed with my brother's face to celebrate his proximity to a dream that had not yet arrived. And they printed party invitations on cardstock that read, "Bronte Collins and Family," without my name anywhere on them, in the house where I had grown up, on the day that was supposed to be mine. My brother was not playing in that Super Bowl. He was sitting on our Italian leather sectional with his feet on the marble coffee table, eating Wagyu sliders, watching strangers compete in a stadium he had never set foot in as a professional, and for that, for the privilege of providing Brody a comfortable audience, my parents chose not to show up for the most important morning of my life. Before continuing, please take 1 second right now and hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss another story like this one, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from, because knowing you are out there means everything to me. Now let me take you back to where this really started. 6 weeks before commencement, I was sitting cross-legged on my dorm mattress with my phone pressed to my ear and one hand flat against my sternum, the way I had learned to hold myself together when I needed to ask my parents for something that should have been simple and never was. The corridor outside my door carrying its familiar late-night texture of keyboards and microwaved food, and the low murmur of other people's ordinary lives proceeding without the specific architecture of grief that had become the wallpaper of mine. I had rehearsed the conversation 3 times before dialing, had coached my voice into the level, composed register I maintained in the registrar's office on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, the particular steadiness of a person who has learned that being taken seriously requires the performance of not needing anything too obviously. "Mom," I said, when Nicole answered with the distracted warmth she deployed, the way a surgeon deploys anesthesia, her attention already distributed across too many surfaces at once. "I wanted to confirm the date. Graduation is February 9th, 2 in the afternoon." The silence that followed was long enough to feel intentional, filled on her end by the muffled roar of Derek's television anchoring our household's gravitational center to whatever game was being previewed or replayed or forensically dissected by men in expensive suits. "Sweetheart," she finally said, her voice carrying the smooth, practiced warmth she used just before delivering news you were expected to receive gracefully. "You do know what day that is, right?" I knew. In Texas, the Super Bowl is not merely a sporting event. It is a civic religion. And in our household, it had metastasized into something more consuming than that over the 4 years since Brody's high school highlight reel had convinced Derek that the family's best investment was in the dream of his son catching footballs professionally. "It's Super Bowl Sunday," I said, keeping my voice even. "But the ceremony is 2 hours, and the stadium is 40 minutes on the toll road. You would be back before halftime." The silence after that had physical weight, the kind that presses against your eardrums the way pressure drops before a storm. Then Derek's voice cut in, loud and blunt and entirely unaware of itself. Avery, a regional agency rep is coming to the house that afternoon. Brody needs this environment to be exactly right. You understand what kind of moment this is for him. My chest tightened around the familiar nausea of that sentence structure. The pivot, the gentle implication that my understanding was the admission fee required simply to participate in a conversation in my own family. Nicole came back on the line to say I had always been so independent, so capable, that I should post some pictures in my cap and gown so she could show the girls at the country club. And then the line went dead, and I sat in the dark of my dorm room holding the phone the way you hold evidence of something you are too exhausted to take to court. What I did not say in that phone call or in any of the accumulating phone calls across 4 years of accumulating evidence was this. I had worked 3 jobs every single semester to bridge the gap between my partial merit scholarship and the actual cost of tuition. A gap my parents had acknowledged once, briefly, at the kitchen table when I was 18, and then stopped acknowledging, because acknowledging it would have required either redirecting resources away from Brody or admitting they had made a deliberate choice, and our family was not built for naming its choices out loud. I had opened my eyes at 4:45 every morning to reach a high-volume Starbucks before the 6 o'clock rush, pulling espresso shots while reviewing note cards, going directly from the espresso machine to a seminar room where I served as a teaching assistant through the middle of the day, and from there to the campus writing center where I tutored underclassmen until the library lights dimmed at 11, surviving on clearance protein bars and communal kitchen coffee 2 days past its best, maintaining a 3.98 grade point average across 16-hour days because the alternative, extending my hand toward Derek and asking him to redirect even a fraction of what he spent on Brody's personal strength coach, his first-class training camp flights to Scottsdale and Tampa, the professional videographer hired to document the journey, felt like a form of humiliation I was not equipped to absorb. Meanwhile, Brody's Instagram was a continuous feed of premium gear and chef-prepared meals and highlight reels, and I documented my own progress in a dollar store spiral notebook next to the used textbooks I resold at semester's end to offset the next one. In 4 years of college, I went home exactly 6 times, and each visit carried the quality of a performance review, with criteria set without my input. I would arrive to find the house ready for guests, designer candle scent, cedar floor wax, and spend the weekend in the background, prepping food for Brody's friends, listening to Derek replay game footage, watching my brother open sponsor packages that arrived almost daily. Not once during any of those visits did anyone ask about my thesis, my academic societies, the national journals requesting my preliminary research data, or the fellowship applications I filed quietly in the far corner of the library after my evening tutoring shift. I had become a background detail in a painting commissioned to feature someone else entirely, and I had learned, without any formal acknowledgement, to stop waiting for someone to turn the canvas. But there was one person who had never stopped looking. The night after that phone call, I dialed Grandma Eleanor, who picked up on the second ring with the particular warmth of a woman who has spent 40 years teaching advanced placement literature and has never lost the instinct for hearing what people are not saying alongside what they are. "Avery, my darling," she said, unhurried and full-weighted, and just the shape of those words was enough to close my throat around everything I had been holding. She told me she already knew. Nicole had called that afternoon trying to explain the logistics, and Grandma Eleanor had told her plainly that she was making a catastrophic error in judgment she would spend years trying to understand. Your mother believes the universe runs on your brother's vertical leap and your father's version of what success looks like from the outside, she said, with the dry, surgical precision of a woman long past the stage of being surprised by the suburban reflex to manage appearances rather than tell the truth. I laughed despite everything, a short, jagged sound that surprised me with its own bitterness. Grandma, I don't know if I can stand at that podium knowing those seats are going to be empty. Her voice turned fierce, the kind of fierce that has nothing to do with volume and everything to do with the absolute certainty behind it. You are not alone, she said. I will be in that stadium if I have to drive my own car down I-35 through every Super Bowl tailgate in the state. She paused and then said, more quietly, "Now tell me the truth. You sound like someone who has already decided something important and decided it in that private, quiet way you decide the things that matter most. What are you carrying?" I froze, because she was right in the way she was always right. The way that comes from 80 years of paying full, undivided attention to the people in your life rather than the image you want them to project. I did not answer directly, because what I was carrying was sealed in a cream-colored envelope inside my graduation gown, and I was not ready to open it yet. She let it go, the way she let things go when she knew you needed to carry them yourself a little longer. Gold doesn't need a spotlight to be valuable, she said before we hung up, and neither do you. 1 week before graduation, I crossed the social policy building courtyard and walked into Dr. Harmon's office with my stomach knotted around a dozen possible interpretations for a formal calendar invite, and found her at her desk in the afternoon light, surrounded by stacked journals and espresso cups, wearing one of her structured blazers the way other people wear armor, as both protection and declaration. Dr. Harmon had been the first professor in 4 years to read my research on socioeconomic barriers in American education and respond not with a grade, but with a genuine, rigorous conversation about the implications of my data and the gaps my framework was positioned to address. The first person in any academic room who had treated my brain as a high-performance instrument rather than a tuition-paying enrollment number. "Close the door," she said, and I did, and sat in the chair where the afternoon light came through the window at the angle of a life I had spent 4 years working toward. "I have been watching you for 4 years," she began. "You are one of the most intellectually disciplined students I have had the privilege of mentoring in 2 decades. Your thesis on socioeconomic mobility and the invisible student is exceptional, publishable work, and I say that with full professional precision, not courtesy." She reached into her desk drawer and placed a sealed envelope on the polished wood between us. Heavy paper, cream-colored, embossed with a seal I recognized from photographs of people whose careers had shaped entire fields. 8 months ago, I submitted your name for a nomination without telling you, because the odds were statistically very small, and I did not want the weight of hoping to become a distraction during your final semester. The results are inside. She slid it toward me. "But wait until after the ceremony to open it. I want graduation day to be memorable for you. Whatever is written on that paper, you earned every inch of it." That night, I folded the envelope carefully and slid it into the hidden inner pocket of my graduation gown, pressed my hand flat against it through the fabric, and felt the sharp rectangular edge of it against my palm, a compass in terrain that had never come with a map. 5 days before the ceremony, I drove into the long driveway of our Westlake Hills house and saw it before I had even cut the engine. A massive custom vinyl banner stretched the full width of the 3-car garage, the metallic blue lettering readable from the street. Bronte Collins, our future NFL star, Super Bowl Sunday blowout. And beneath that banner, partially obscured by it, was the window of my old bedroom, the glass I had sat beside doing homework through 4 years of high school, now literally in the shadow of my family's celebration of someone else's future. I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, engine off, the Texas February heat pressing against the windshield, and registered the geometry of it without surprise, because the surprise had been wrung out of me a long time ago. Inside, Nicole was at the social emergency frequency, arguing with a catering coordinator about Wagyu marbling. Derek was in the backyard supervising installation of a second outdoor television near the pool. Brody was on the Italian leather sectional, feet on the marble coffee table, scrolling his phone with the unhurried ease of a person who has never once wondered whether the world was going to make room for him. On the entryway console where Nicole usually kept her design magazines, there was a stack of cream-colored party invitations on cardstock heavy enough to suggest intention, ready for hand delivery to the neighborhood and country club network. I picked one up. The font was clean and expensive looking. "Join us to celebrate Bronte Collins and family," it read, at the address of the house I had grown up in. My name was not on the card. I was not a member of the family being celebrated. In the house I had lived in for 18 years, I had been edited out of the definition of family entirely. Nicole appeared from the kitchen doorway, waving one hand in my direction without pausing her phone call. "Avery, I didn't know you were coming in today," she said, her attention already sliding back to the caterer. I moved through the house quietly, and in the kitchen I found the counters buried under football-shaped plates and team-colored napkins and, centered on the island, a 3-foot sheet cake being finished by a bakery artist. An airbrushed, hyper-realistic rendering of Brody's face, surrounded by footballs and the words, "Draft season is here," in metallic gold frosting. A cake ordered and paid for to celebrate my brother's proximity to a dream, on the day my 4 years of documented academic sacrifice were supposed to be honored in a stadium 40 minutes away. "Do you need help?" I heard myself ask, the vestigial impulse to earn even a temporary seat at the table by being necessary to its functioning, one I had never fully managed to unlearn. Nicole waved me off with a flick of her French manicured wrist. "You should head back before traffic gets bad," she said, eyes on her phone. "You don't want to be late for your ceremony thing." Your ceremony thing. 4 years, 3 jobs, 2 published research papers, a 3.98 grade point average, 3 dismissive words. The night before graduation, I sat on the edge of my dorm bed and gave my family one last chance that I already knew, with the full intelligence I had spent 4 years developing, they would not take. Not because I was naive, but because there is a part of the human heart formed before you learn to reason that still reaches toward the people it was born beside, even after they have moved consistently out of reach. The party noise hit me before Nicole finished saying hello. Thumping bass, expensive stemware, overlapping confident laughter from the inner circle of the Westlake Hills social network, gathering to toast the golden boy the night before his big day. I told her the thing I had been saving, the thing I had believed might be large enough to reach across all the distance between us, that I had been selected as the student representative, that out of 3,000 graduating students, I was the one who would stand at the podium in front of 10,000 people and deliver the commencement address. I said it clearly, without trembling, and waited. For one suspended heartbeat, I thought it had landed. Then her voice lifted away from the phone, bright and aimed at someone across the room, something about the crab cake order being short. She came back apologizing, asked me to repeat myself, and when I did, she said, "It was truly wonderful, sweetie," and she really had to call the caterer back before they closed. Derek's voice boomed across the background. "Who's on the phone? Tell them to call back. The game film isn't going to set itself up." And the line went dead before I had finished my sentence. I set the phone down on the nightstand and looked at my graduation gown hanging on the closet door, a $48 rental, the inside pocket holding a sealed envelope I had not yet opened, and I understood something I had been circling for years without being willing to name it. They had not forgotten my graduation because something more important demanded them. They had forgotten me. And the forgetting had been so gradual and so continuous that it no longer registered as a choice. As I turned off the dorm room light, I felt the final thread of a very old obligation snap somewhere in my chest, cleanly and without drama, the way a wire breaks when it has been under tension for too long. Graduation morning arrived with a pale, quiet winter light coming through the dorm window, the kind of light that does not make promises. I showered in the communal bathroom, dressed in the $12 thrift store navy shift I had bought because it was the nicest thing I owned that did not smell of espresso or library dust, and styled my hair with the cheap ceramic iron that had survived 4 years of daily use. I checked Nicole's Instagram before I left, against the better judgment I had not yet fully trained myself into, and found a video of Derek at the outdoor grill in the backyard, flipping Wagyu patties with the focused pleasure of a man who takes his recreational activities with professional seriousness, the Brody Collins banner rippling in the morning breeze behind him. And through the sliding glass door, Brody was visible on the sectional watching pre-game coverage, not suiting up, not driving to a stadium, not preparing for the athletic performance of his life, just watching, comfortable and tended to and celebrated, while 40 minutes away, his sister was putting on a rented graduation gown alone in a communal bathroom before sunrise. Then Grandma Eleanor's message arrived, telling me she was already on I-35, that traffic was punishing, but she would be there, that she was more proud than she had words for, and I pressed the phone against my chest for one moment, breathed, and reached for my graduation gown, and felt through the fabric the sharp rectangular press of the envelope, and decided I was ready. The stadium was everything I had expected and nothing I was psychologically prepared for. A vast, roaring organism of family love, the concourses dense with balloons and poster board signs, and mothers adjusting their children's mortarboards with fingers made clumsy by the effort of not crying before the ceremony began. Fathers with cameras they had been practicing with for a week. Grandparents clutching monogrammed handkerchiefs already damp with preemptive joy. I moved through all of it feeling like a figure in a painting of someone else's memory. Finding Section C, Row 12, where a placard with my name marked 4 seats reserved, with the stubborn vestigial hope of a person who is not yet fully surrendered to what the evidence has long established. All 4 were empty, except for one thing. A faded purple knitted scarf, handmade, its stitches carrying the small, endearing imperfections that Grandma Eleanor had always called character marks. the scent of her lavender perfume still warm in the wool, even in the open air. She had made it this far, at least. Then my phone vibrated with her message. Stuck in a pileup on the northbound lanes, 3 semis, highway completely closed, apologizing in the agonized language of a woman who has never in 80 years broken a promise she intended to keep. I typed that I loved her and to please stay safe, tucked the phone away, and walked toward the graduate assembly area with my heels clicking against the stadium floor in a rhythm I consciously decided to let be enough. Near the family section, a tall man in a worn canvas jacket, holding a handmade sign for a graduate further down the alphabet, caught my eye. A stranger who had clearly watched me stand in front of the 4 empty seats long enough to understand what they represented, and who offered me, across the distance between us, a small, quiet nod. Not of pity, but of recognition. The nod of one person who has understood something difficult to another who is currently living it. A stranger's acknowledgement in a stadium of 10,000 people was the only warmth the morning gave me, and I held it the way you hold a coal in the rain, and I straightened my shoulders, and I took my place in line. I am going to pause right here, because if you have ever stood in a room full of people celebrating and felt like the only person without a cheering section, this one is for you. Hit that like button right now and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because what I am about to tell you is the moment everything changes. Now, the processional began. The march into the arena opened into the full light and sound of the stadium with a roar that hit like a physical force. Flashbulbs from every tier of the stands, strobing across thousands of faces in the moving columns of graduates. And I kept my eyes locked forward on the mortarboard ahead of me, making the private commitment not to look at Section C until I was ready to absorb what I found there. But the heart is not a well-disciplined organ. When we settled into our field rows, I looked and found the 4 burnt orange plastic seats standing out against the surrounding families like a fresh wound. Grandma Eleanor's purple scarf still draped across seat 4, a lonely splash of color in a sea of people waving signs and air horns. Then my phone vibrated once, and against every better judgment I had developed across 22 years, I opened the notification and found a new Instagram story from Nicole. Our Westlake Hills backyard transformed into a Super Bowl paradise. Professional streamers in team colors draped through the oak trees. Derek at the center of the frame with a premium craft beer in one hand and a spatula in the other. His face carrying the kind of full, uninhibited physical joy that I had spent my entire life trying to generate in him and had never once managed to produce. While Brody's voice narrated from off-camera with the easy confidence of a person who has never once had to negotiate for his audience's attention. And in the background, Nicole was with the country club women, wearing her custom jersey, her social radiance at complete intensity. 40 minutes from a stadium where her daughter was about to walk to a podium with 4 empty seats behind her and a secret folded in her gown pocket. And not one of them was watching. I closed the app, put the phone away, breathed through the shaking in my hands, and turned to face the stage. When the chancellor called my name to the podium, I stood, smoothed the polyester of my gown, and began the longest walk of my life, toward a monolith of carved wood and institutional steel backed by the university seal, the structure designed to make whoever stood at it feel the full weight of what they were representing. and I felt it entirely. 3,000 graduates behind me, 10,000 audience members in front. Section C, row 12, 4 empty seats. I gripped the edges of the podium, adjusted the microphone, and for one suspended crystalline moment, the stadium went genuinely quiet in the way large crowds go quiet when they sense that what is coming is not what they were expecting. The prepared remarks I had memorized dissolved in my throat, because the girl who wrote those careful, appropriate words had still been maintaining the performance, and the girl standing at the podium now had run out of things she needed to protect. Then I saw her, Grandma Eleanor, her white hair wind-loosened, her face flushed from whatever combination of I-35 traffic management and pure 80-year-old stubbornness had finally delivered her into seat 4, settling into the chair with her purple scarf across her lap and looking up to find me at the podium and giving me a thumbs up with a face that was streaming with tears and fierce with a pride so unqualified and complete that the air came back into my lungs all at once. I found my voice, and it was steadier than I had any right to expect, a resonance that started somewhere below the fear and rose through me like something structural. 4 years ago, I began, the words carrying through the speakers and out across the arena. I arrived on this campus with 2 suitcases and $17 in my checking account. I let the silence settle. I did not have a backup plan, or a family safety net, or a trust fund waiting to catch me. What I had was a quiet, relentless belief that if I worked hard enough, the work would eventually speak louder than my circumstances. Today, I want to speak to the invisible students in these rows, to everyone who worked an overnight shift before an 8 o'clock exam, who chose digital textbooks over a week's groceries, who looked up at the family section today and found empty seats where a cheering section was supposed to be. Success does not require an audience. We built this in the dark, without a spotlight, and the fact that we are standing here is the only credential that matters. I stepped back from the microphone, and the stadium did not so much applaud as detonate. A standing ovation beginning in the graduate section and moving backward through the stands like a current through water. Students on their feet, some of them openly weeping, the sound crashing over me in successive waves as I walked back to my seat with my heart hammering against my ribs. Grandma Eleanor was on her feet, both arms above her head, applauding with the full, unself-conscious joy of a woman who had earned, through 80 years of showing up, the complete freedom to stop caring how she looked doing it. One person. That was the secret. It only takes one person to make you feel seen, and that person does not even have to share your last name. Take a breath right there, because if that speech gave you chills, if you have ever been the invisible student or the invisible child or the one who kept going when nobody was watching, hit that like right now and share this with someone who needs it today, because what comes next is the part that changes everything. Now the names began to roll. The alphabetical procession moved through the graduating class in its long, steady cascade, each name a small detonation of joy in the family sections, air horns and cowbells and screaming, uninhibited love marking every graduate's crossing of the stage like a drumbeat of belonging. When the W surnames arrived, I heard it. Avery Collins, summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, departmental honors. and I stood and walked to the stage with the sensation of moving through water that had decided to carry me. The Chancellor's grip was firm as he pressed the heavy diploma folder into my hands. Cameras flashed in their strobe light rhythm of official transition, and I turned and raised one hand towards Section C, Row 12, where Grandma Eleanor was waving both arms above her head with the full, unguarded enthusiasm of a woman who had driven through a highway disaster to be one witness in a stadium where I needed exactly one. And behind her, the stranger in the canvas jacket was standing too. Not for his own graduate, not for anyone he knew, but for me. His face open with a genuine, vicarious pride that was the most uncomplicated gift anyone offered me that day. The face of a person who had seen my empty seats and heard my speech and understood the subtext of my solitude completely. I waved back at both of them, because showing up for someone you do not know is one of the most irreducible acts of human love that exists, and it has no prerequisite of history. Walking off the stage, clutching the diploma to my chest, I checked my phone and found a new story from Nicole, posted 3 minutes earlier. Derek on the Westlake Hills patio performing a victory dance for the opening kickoff of the Super Bowl broadcast. Brody at the edge of the frame with a plate of food, 50 guests cheering around him, the caption reading, "Best Super Bowl party ever." The story had been posted at the precise, documentable, time-stamped minute that the Chancellor had placed my summa cum laude diploma folder in my hands. I looked at the screen for one full moment, registered what it was telling me, closed the app, put the phone in my pocket, and sat through the remainder of the ceremony in a complete and deliberate stillness until the caps went flying and the commencement was declared over. I did not throw my cap. I pressed it against my chest, alongside the diploma, and pushed through the celebrating crowd toward the parking lot, where the post-ceremony world was in its full, overwhelming expression. Fathers hoisting daughters onto their shoulders, mothers pinning corsages to lapels, grandparents unrolling handmade banners. I found a weathered concrete bench near the edge of the lot, sat down, and let the tears come. Not gently. Not in the managed, composure-preserving way I had cried through most of the past 4 years, but fully and completely. The gut-wrenching, doubled-over grief of a person releasing 4 years of being functionally invisible in the family that was supposed to be the first and most permanent structure of her life. All of it coming out in an empty parking lot on Super Bowl Sunday. The sound of it absorbed by the ambient noise of the stadium and the suburban neighborhood beyond its walls, while the rest of the city watched a game. I need you to stop with me for just 1 second, because this girl, alone on a concrete bench in a rented gown, holding a diploma her family chose not to witness, is the same girl who is about to change every single thing. If this story is moving you, hit that like right now and leave a comment. Would you have told them about the envelope, or would you have let it play out? Subscribe so you are here when this story lands. Now let me tell you what happened in the Uber. The Uber driver who arrived was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the economy of expression belonging to people who have seen enough of life to know when not to ask for the complete version of a story. She took one look at me, the gown, the diploma, the red-rimmed eyes, and reached into the center console and extended a small packet of tissues over the seat without a word. "Rough day, kiddo?" she asked after a moment, when the silence had settled enough to hold a question. I thought about the 50-person party, the Wagyu sliders, the story posted at the exact moment I crossed the stage, the cake printed with my brother's face. "Family stuff," I told her. She nodded with the understanding of a woman who has heard those two words carry everything from mild inconvenience to full catastrophe. Put the car in gear and drove, letting me cry in the back seat without commentary, the radio low enough to be texture rather than intrusion. After several miles, I reached into the hidden pocket of my gown and closed my fingers around the cream-colored envelope and slid my thumb under the flap and unfolded the letter inside and read the words printed there in clean, authoritative type on paper bearing the embossed gold crest of the Fulbright program. The letter informed me, in the formal, unhurried language of an institution accustomed to delivering consequential news, that I had been selected as a Fulbright scholar for the coming academic year, that my research proposal on socioeconomic barriers and educational access in post-industrial economies had been chosen for full funding at Heidelberg University in Germany, that the total value of the award, tuition, monthly living stipend, travel allowances, and a research assistant position at one of Europe's most prestigious academic institutions, exceeded $100,000, and that I had been selected from a pool of over 10,000 applicants worldwide. Dr. Harmon had submitted my name 8 months ago, in secret, navigating the full bureaucratic architecture of a State Department nomination on behalf of a girl whose own parents had never once, across 4 years and 8 semesters, asked about her grade point average. The Uber driver glanced at me in the mirror, read the tears on my face, and raised one quiet, inquiring eyebrow. "Good news?" she asked. I looked out the window at the Austin suburbs scrolling past, the beige and green of it, the ordinariness of it, the world that had carried me through 4 years of this, and felt, for the first time, the specific physical sensation of occupying space in a reality that had made room for me deliberately on the basis of what I had actually done. "I think my life just started," I whispered. She smiled, warm and genuine and unreserved. "Well then, congratulations, honey," she said. "The world is a whole lot bigger than this city." I found Grandma Eleanor parked at the far edge of the lot, her vintage sedan sitting in the afternoon sun like a small, dignified outpost of sanity. And when she saw me tap on the window, her face broke into the widest, most unguarded joy I had seen in a decade. She struggled out with her knees complaining their familiar complaint and pulled me into a hug that had the quality of something structural. A wall being built around me, a declaration of alliance, a statement of permanent record. She pulled back, scanned my face with the diagnostic precision of 40 years spent reading between the lines of what young people say and do not say, and then I reached into the inner pocket of my gown and placed the Fulbright letter in her hands without a word and watched her read it. The progression of her expression was slow and extraordinary. Confusion resolving into recognition, recognition expanding into something vast and tearful and fierce that moved across her face like weather crossing an open landscape. When she reached the award amount, she looked up at me, her eyes full. "Is this real?" "It's real, Grandma." She sat back heavily on the edge of the driver's seat, one hand pressed flat against her sternum, and for one terrifying moment, I thought the shock was too much. But then she laughed, a full, resonant, defiant sound that carried out across the asphalt and up into the warm Texas afternoon. The laugh of a woman who has waited 80 years to see justice arrive and has just watched it walk through the door. My granddaughter, a Fulbright scholar, she said. And those fools are back home eating potato chips and yelling at a television screen. She looked up at me, and the laughter hardened into strategy, the delight calcifying into something deliberate and precise. Do your parents know? No. Good, she said, the word landing with the clean, solid weight of a verdict. My 80th birthday party is in 3 weeks. The entire Westlake Circle will be there. Every aunt, every cousin, every one of your father's important friends, everyone who has sat at our holiday table for the past decade listening to what Bronte was going to become. Don't say a word before then. Let me handle this, Avery. Let them see exactly what they have been ignoring in front of every person they have ever tried to impress. I hesitated for one moment, the old version of me pulling briefly toward the familiar safety of private humiliation over public truth. Then I thought about the invitation that read, Bronte Collins and family, without my name on it, and the story posted at the exact minute I crossed the stage, and the cake printed with my brother's face on the day of my graduation. Okay, Grandma, I said. Okay. The 3 weeks between graduation and Grandma Eleanor's birthday passed in the surreal, purposeful quiet of a person who has made a decision and is simply waiting for the moment to arrive. I returned to campus, packed my life into 3 suitcases, an exercise that was simultaneously daunting and clarifying, the reduction of 22 years to what fit in a cargo hold revealing, with uncomfortable precision, how little of what surrounded me had been given, and how much I had built entirely alone. I navigated the German visa paperwork, made 2 trips to the consulate, and emailed Dr. Harmon a letter of gratitude so dense with the specific and truthful weight of what I owed her that I rewrote it 4 times before sending it. She wrote back one sentence. I always knew you had the fire. I just provided the oxygen. Now go burn bright. Nicole called once a week, briefly, asking about the job search, suggesting with the gentle condescension of someone who has never had to search for anything, that a sociology degree required realistic expectations, mentioning that Derek might find me a desk position at his commercial real estate firm if I was struggling. I thanked her for the thought, said I had several things in progress, and let her talk about Bronte's tryout schedule, carrying my secret into the next week and the next, counting down. Grandma Eleanor's house was an ivy-covered craftsman in the older, more gracious part of the city, the kind of house that has the settled, confident beauty of a structure genuinely loved by the people who lived in it. The driveway was already dense with high-end SUVs and German sedans by the time I arrived. 40 people gathered in the full expression of comfortable, privileged social ease. I sat in my car for one moment before going in, confirmed that I looked composed and professionally certain, picked up the Fulbright letter from the passenger seat, folded it once, and put it in my purse. Inside, the party was in its full, warm, decorated swing. Aunts with Prosecco, cousins with their children, Derek's business associates with their networking pleasantries. And Bronte, at the center of the living room, wearing a custom-fitted jersey and holding court with the ease of a person who has been the gravitational center of rooms his entire life, describing the scout's assessment of his lateral speed to a circle of relatives who leaned toward him with the rapt, invested attention of people who have been told, for long enough, that this is the most interesting thing the family has produced. Derek stood just behind him, his reflected pride so complete and consuming that he did not notice me come through the door. Grandma Eleanor found me in the kitchen, her eyes alive with the particular intellectual mischief of a woman who has been waiting for this moment long enough to have fully choreographed it in her mind. "Soon," she mouthed. I nodded. After the birthday cake was served and 80 candles were extinguished to the applause of the room, Grandma Eleanor rose at the head of the table and the room quieted the way rooms always quieted when she chose to speak. An instinctive, reflexive deference to a presence that commanded it without asking. She thanked everyone for coming, spoke briefly and elegantly about the strange privilege of age and the way it sharpens the eye for what actually matters. And then she said she wanted to hear from the family. Brody stepped forward immediately, spoke about the scouts and combine projections and mid-round draft pick probability, and the room applauded with the warmth of people who have staked some portion of their own identity on a dream's eventual arrival. Grandma Eleanor listened with polite neutrality and then said quietly that potential was a wonderful and fragile thing, and also that it was a debt you had not yet paid. She turned her gaze across the table. "Avery, my oldest grandchild, you graduated 3 weeks ago. Is there anything you would like to share with the family?" 40 pairs of eyes moved toward me in the particular way of a room that has been given permission to pay attention to something it has been ignoring. I did not rush. I reached into my purse, found the Fulbright letter, and unfolded it with a deliberate, unhurried grace that gave every person in the room time to register the weight and formality of the paper, the gold-embossed crest, the official language of an institution that does not communicate with people who have not earned its attention. I set it flat on the table. "I received this on graduation day," I said, my voice steady and clear, carrying none of the tremor that had defined it for most of my adult life in rooms like this one. "The same day the rest of you were at our house for the Super Bowl party. I have been selected as a Fulbright scholar. I have received a $100,000 grant to conduct research at Heidelberg University in Germany. Out of 10,000 applicants worldwide, I was among the few hundred chosen. I leave in 48 hours on a one-way ticket." The silence that followed had texture and weight, dense, charged, full of the specific discomfort of a room full of people simultaneously updating a model of reality they had held, without question, for too long. Aunt Carol audibly inhaled. One of Derek's business associates murmured something to his wife in the tone of involuntary reassessment. Nicole's face, which had maintained for years the smooth, managed surface of a woman who believed social composure was the highest form of intelligence, went pale in the slow, structural way of a facade receiving a force it was not built to withstand. "Avery, why didn't you tell us?" The social warmth was entirely gone from her voice, replaced by something rawer and more genuine. The sound of a woman who has just understood the true dimensions of a mistake she can no longer manage. "Because you didn't ask," I said, the words landing without heat, without drama, with only the specific and irreducible weight of the truth. "I called you the night before graduation to tell you I was the student representative, that I was going to deliver the commencement address to 10,000 people. You hung up mid-sentence to call the caterer. Dad told me to call back because the game film needed setting up." I looked at Derek, who was wearing the expression of a man experiencing accountability in a form he had no previous framework for. "I spent my graduation day alone, and I cried in a parking lot afterward while you were celebrating a Super Bowl watch party for a game that Brody was not even playing in." The room absorbed that last sentence the way stone absorbs heat, slowly and completely. Because it was the irreducible fact, the one that lived beneath all the others, the one that made the entire architecture of the situation visible to everyone in the room at once. They had not missed my graduation because something more important demanded them. They had missed it so that my brother could have a comfortable audience for watching television. And they had done this while printing invitations to a party in my childhood home that did not include my name in the definition of family. Grandma Eleanor rose from her chair, and the room fell completely silent. "I raised you better than this," she said, looking at Nicole with the directness of a woman who has run out of patience for the distance between what people know and what they are willing to say. "You chose a pigskin over your daughter's genius. You poured every resource into a dream that hasn't arrived yet, while this girl worked 3 jobs and paid for her own excellence and stood at a podium in front of 10,000 people and told the truth. She is leaving because you have not yet understood what you have. I pray you figure it out before it costs you everything." Derek rose, reaching for the familiar authority of a man who has always controlled the room. "Avery, we can fix this. A celebration dinner will make it right." "You can't buy back 4 years, Dad," I said, because it was the truth and not a punishment, the way the most important truths rarely are. "I'm not leaving because I'm angry at you. I'm leaving because the world I built for myself is in Germany, and it is more mine than anything I have ever had here, and somewhere, quietly. I think you both already know that." 2 days later, I stood at Austin Bergstrom International Airport with 3 suitcases containing everything I had decided was worth carrying forward. My phone full of missed calls and messages from Nicole and Derek in the full spectrum of late-arriving regret. Apologetic, then desperate, then the quieter frequency of a person who has just understood the true dimensions of something they cannot undo. I did not delete them, but I did not open them. The only message I read was from Grandma Eleanor. "Fly safe, my Fulbright. I will be watching from Austin, and I will be the proudest woman in the Western Hemisphere. The world is finally right side up." The plane leveled off over the Atlantic, the dark water stretching to a horizon that held none of what I was leaving behind, and I opened my laptop and began drafting my first research proposal for the team at Heidelberg, the words arriving with a fluency and certainty that I had always possessed, but had spent 4 years performing in front of an audience that was not watching. I want to be precise about something, because the distinction matters. I was not running from a family that had failed to see me. I was flying toward a version of myself that had always existed, quietly and without applause, and was finally, irrevocably moving at full speed. 6 months later, sitting in a small, ancient cafe in Heidelberg, with December snow dusting the cobblestones outside, and the coffee arriving in a ceramic cup that held exactly the right warmth for a winter afternoon, my phone lit up with a video call from Nicole. I accepted it because something in me had arrived at the particular form of peace that is not the absence of pain, but the presence of enough distance from it to see it clearly, to understand it as something that happened rather than something that is still happening. She looked different on the screen. The Westlake Hills polish present, but beneath it something softer and more uncertain. The face of a woman who has spent several months sitting with a truth that resisted all her usual methods of management. She told me they were in therapy, both of them, trying to understand how the years had arranged themselves into the shape they had taken. I told her I was genuinely glad, and I meant it. "But understanding me isn't your job anymore, Mom," I said. And I smiled when I said it, because I was telling the truth. It's mine, and I'm getting very good at it. I hung up gently, without anger, without the performance of forgiveness as closure, and looked out the cafe window at the German winter. The snow on the cobblestones, the old stone buildings standing the way they had stood for centuries. The city entirely indifferent to my history and entirely available to my future. And felt, in the quietest and most durable way a person can feel anything, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, seated at a table I had built with my own 2 hands, in a room that had been waiting a long time for me to arrive. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next one. And before you go, if this story stayed with you, if Avery's voice is still in your head right now, take one last second to hit subscribe so you are here for the next one, because there are more stories like this one waiting, and I do not want you to miss them. Drop a comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest. I read every single one.